We, the people from Incron, thought it might be helpful to show you some of our new features. One of the new features is the trace import. For that purpose, I start our tool suite and it comes up in the so-called chronVIEW mode. In this mode, I select the menu item Import CSV Trace and a wizard opens. And this wizard guides you through the process of importing your specific recorded trace file from, for example, an embedded system which was instrumented. The first step is to select the file. One of the formats we support is the CSV format. I have prepared a file, ems.csv, and this is the first step. The next step goes to a window where you specify the usual properties of the CSV, like separating the columns. As you can see, we use here a single comma as a separator. This is already predefined in that case, and also quotation marks or comments can be defined, adapted to your specific needs. In the next step, I have to assign the meanings of the single columns. The first column is a timestamp, the second column is a process, and the third column is an action. In the case that in your file format this is a different order, you just select the column and then you can change the meaning. For example, I can define that the first column contains a resource, this is shown here, but better for this example, I better go back to the timestamp as in the first column. When you have defined the meaning of your columns, you go to the next step, which is to define the names and the types of your tasks. Is a task an ISR or is it a simple task? And also the priority. And this information can be used to deduce the correct scheduling in case that your trace does not contain all of the needed information. So the next step then is to define what action has which semantics. The semantic means that each line can distinguish if a task is activated, if it is started, or if it terminates. I have already done this before, so the system remembers which meaning is used for the file extension CSV. Once you have defined that, this is also stored for your files. To change that is very easy. You just see the actions here. These are the keywords from your file, and you assign them one of the predefined meanings. In our case, terminate means terminate, so I select terminate, of course. And I can also do that for interrupt service routine actions and for functions. Functions are not contained in this example, so this is empty. The last step of the wizard allows you to define the format of your timestamp column. If you remember, we at Incron use always an integer value together with a unit of time, with one of the standard units. Other possible formats are pure integer values with a predefined unit, or ticks, like processor ticks. So you can also specify the speed of your processor. How long is one tick in real time? Additionally, you can specify that the single timestamps in your file contain not the absolute time value as the beginning of the trace or something like that, but they also can contain relative values. And you can also have timestamps which overflow. If you have a 16-bit counter for your timestamp counting processor ticks, it will overflow at 65,000 and something. And so you have to specify with which value it overflows, and then the import of the trace corrects this. Once this last step is done, you go on finish, and the system goes through the trace and is ready to present you the data. Here at the bottom you can see the end time of the imported trace. It's nearly 1 second. I open one of the diagrams, and these are just the same as in this normal simulator window. For example, you can see the state diagram, the process state diagram, which shows you all the scheduling states of your tasks in the system in the way they are found in the CSV file. What you see here is a task, it gets activated, it goes to the ready state because it's not scheduled, and then at some point in time the processor is free and the system executes this task, and it's always at different points preempted by an interrupt. Maybe it's preempted by a longer running task, and also these changes can be seen in the diagrams. If you zoom out just a little bit and go to the beginning of the trace, for example here, we look at the longer window, I've selected a range, then you can see that the execution time of this task changes. It varies slightly. And if you want to see if this task always fulfills its deadline requirements, for example, then you just use the new feature of managing our real-time risks. You add a requirement, for example the response time requirement. This is very easy. You just give it a name, say deadline for task T-Rot. You select, of course, the specific task T-Rot here, and you give it the response time as defined in your requirements. Say in that case it's the rotation of some engine control, and I give it the say 1.5 milliseconds deadline. Now I click on OK, and the system just goes through your trace file and evaluates all occurrences of this task execution and compares the calculated time with your limit. And I can see with one glance that there are 15% failures and 84% successful execution runs of this task. You can go to detail, just select here the failed, go to the time you're interested in, and then the visible windows, the visible diagrams center on this time interval where this requirement violation has occurred. You can see here that the task is activated, and until its termination, the total time is more than 1.5 milliseconds at 1.57866 milliseconds, and this violates your deadline. If you want to see the distribution, how is the execution time of this task distributed, then you just create a histogram. You select, you want to see a requirement histogram, you select here the requirement you are interested in, press update, and then you see the distribution of all the response times of all executions of this task. And here the green ones, they are the good execution ones, and the red numbers denote that this is larger than your deadline that you have specified. If you want to see more, especially about our new requirements, just look at our other movies. Thanks.